success lies in recognizing and seeing the opportunity. We can all step up to this challenge. The disruption of the chain, the new diseases that's going to come, the ecosystems that's going to be impacted, because of climate change, there will be refugees problems that come from other world countries.
With the group here, it's been an exciting and busy couple of weeks, so I think we've been quite inspired by the Minister, who's given us very clear policy indications, and of course it's quite fascinating because we have here, of course, Dr. Nagu from the Ministry. He's the Deputy Secretary General, Environment and Climate Change from MESTEC, and as I speak, Ben, who's with Asia Research and Engagement. I believe he's focused a bit on the financial sector and others and governance. And we have Lavanya, WWF Malaysia, Head of Policy and Climate Change since 2013, and she's the Malaysian rep on the WWF network. I'll explain a little bit about her because she gave me some notes, and of course I'll leave to our other speakers to give a bit of background about themselves. Lavanya is a Sheng scholar with a Master's in Sustainability and Climate Change, and she's got over 15 years of experience in environmental governance. Maybe just before I move on to the others, just explain a bit about myself. Other than being one of the directors moving on this, I also work as a research hack essentially, and combining a lot of quantitative and qualitative information about sustainable supply chains, and I've been quite busy with commodities like palm oil as well, and I think governance issues are very paramount in this. So I'm very glad to be here with the speakers, and maybe we're going to speak in the order of Dr. Nagu, and then Ben and Lavanya. Maybe we could start with Dr. Nagu to give a short introduction and give us his 10 minutes. And what I'll do is I'll just give a 1 minute warning when we are reaching towards that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and good morning everyone. Well, actually my work is very easy now because I just have to detour whatever my minister says. So that's my 10-minute speech. Alright, it's really exciting now because I think after we've got this whole new government, we've got a ministry dedicated for climate change and environment, and we've got energy as well and we've got science and technology. So while I think Minister covered the whole spectrum that I wanted to share with you today, but I think I'd just like to put the whole climate change governance into a couple of important segments that we need to probably pay some attention to. I think while Malaysia is looking at climate change, and the Minister made this inference that we're a small country, we are 30 plus million, our contribution to the GHG emission is probably about 0.67 of total global emission. While that's true, I think we have also a role to play, and it provides opportunities through climate change platforms. I think while being a mega diverse country, being a rich biodiversity country, I think climate change provides a very important need for us to link nature-based solutions, biodiversity and climate change. So that's very important. And to make that happen, while I'm excited that we've got this whole new government with the ministry established, the environment sector got a bit fragmented, unfortunately, under the new government. Previously, we had natural resources environment where you had the brown guys, the green guys all in one ministry. So when you speak about biodiversity, you've got your climate colleagues all in the same ministry, but now it's two different ministries. So I think what we are planning, what we have is, although we have these coordination committees and all that, I think climate governance in Malaysia also needs a much stronger and robust institutional framework. The minister made reference to the National Climate Center. So when the minister got on board, she said, I want this National Climate Center. At the same time, the Chief of Staff says, not one extra civil servant to be appointed in the new government. So what we're going to do is we're going to repurpose existing agencies. We've got this Green Tech Corporation, which has been doing quite a lot of work on low carbon mobility and all that. We are thinking, as an interim measure, to repurpose them to be the climate center. That's one. Second is, while many people have been talking, I think the UK government shared with us that they're the first to come out with a law. Our take at it is, yes, we probably need a legal framework to help with climate governance. But I think the first question we need to ask ourselves, because under this whole climate diplomacy, there's this very important principle called common but differentiated responsibilities. Yes, we've got a common problem, but we've got differentiated responsibilities, and it's also tied to respective capabilities. We need to ask a question, does Malaysia at this junction need a climate law? We probably need, but for what purpose? Is it going to be identical to what the UK does? Or do we have to do it to facilitate us being climate resilient, but to also facilitate certain amount of economic growth? So these are the important questions we need to ask as well. The other element that I think is also important is capacity. Minister also did say we are infancy in this whole sustainable issue, and it's quite true because our focus has been quite a lot on economic development, and we also have got challenges in meeting the disparity between the B40s and all that. But I think what's important in capacity is technology and also for science to guide policy. So I think in Malaysia what we really need to really have is to have this wider link with research institutions, universities, to give us a kind of scientific information that will help us make informed decisions. That's very important, and that information is a bit lacking at the moment. Somebody asked just now whether our climate data is available. Malaysia, under the obligations under the Climate Convention, we produce national communication reports. We have produced 3 reports so far. It's available online at the Ministry's website, as well as the UNFCCC website. So those published data are there. It's called the national communication, and we've got a biannual update on how we are doing in meeting our commitments that we made through our national determined contributions. So that's there. So that's all available for somebody who asks a question this time. The other element is, I think if you talk to a lay person or a general person on the street, there's climate effective. They will tell you, and everybody blames anything and everything for climate change, and I get a bit worried. I also tend to blame my receding hairline to climate change. You know, so sometimes it's not really true because there's always extreme weather patterns that happen. And when that discussion comes on board, every time the solution is some hard engineering. For example, we're having coastal erosion, the interventions, and I'm reading some articles, it's always been hard engineering, and you forget this whole element of where I said something earlier, nature-based solutions, and Malaysia is blessed with biodiversity. So that's a couple of points I'd like to share. And that's linked to this whole idea of this communication, education, and public awareness. And I think we've not really, and this is achieved for everyone, to communicate better about what's happening. What is it in Malaysia? This whole Paris Agreement, I mean, everybody knows this Paris Agreement, what it means for Malaysia. What it means for Malaysia is, in the good old days when we negotiated the Convention on Biodiversity, the Convention on Climate Change, the UN Convention on Desertification, under the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities, developing countries always say, the big boys do first, we will follow suit, subject to tech transfer, subject to more money. But with the Paris Agreement, everybody's on board. You got to do something, everybody's got to do something. And that's added work, added commitment, added resources for a country like Malaysia as well. So it creates the playing field quite different. The lines between developed and developing is also getting a bit different. So that's very important, I think. And that's something that we have to keep at the back of our mind. So somebody's asked also about education. I'm not trying to repeat all. Education, I think, while I do agree that we need to put all these things in the syllabus, I'm a parent. I always feel sad that my kids have to learn more and more things. But I think what's also important is experiential learning that I think our colleagues in the Ministry of Education probably has to look at. I mean, you can put this whole thing for biodiversity. Actually, in our Form 1, Form 2 syllabus now, I'm glad to say that it's perubahan iklim, there's biodiversity. But what needs to happen is, I think, more of experiential learning and the narratives to get this thing to the bigger public. It's NARIC, the institute that does all these hydrological studies, recently published a 2017 study to say it's business as usual. Sea level rise in Malaysia could be about 0.6 meters. It's not that alarming, but it could affect our mangrove areas. If our mangrove areas are affected, it could affect many things. Of course, your postal has become more vulnerable, but even our most favorite fruit can be vulnerable. We had a volunteer MC, right? We also have got a volunteering species that does $1 million job of pollinating durians. Because the flying fox depends on its mangroves to pollinate durians. So it's a whole connected ecosystem that we have to look in a bigger picture. So that are a couple of things I thought I'll share initially. And now since I know we are here talking to non-executive directors of companies, I think while Malaysia Minister has said there's many low-hanging fruits that companies can do well, embracing no single-use plastic, I think companies also have to start looking about life beyond the products that they produce. Extended producer responsibility is something very important. I mean, when you do something simple like a pen, what happens to the pen after it leaves the consumer's hand? I think the equation of circular economy has to come into the discussions of every company. I know the big guys are talking about it, Hewlett-Packard and all that, they're talking about it. But in Malaysia, 99% of the industry is small and medium scale industry. So for them, at the end of the day, it's the margins, right? But I think slowly, with the help of the bigger boys, we hope this whole circular economy equation comes into play. And that's very important. If that does not happen, and then I think what in my earlier statement, climate change gives a lot of opportunity for many sectors. And with that, I'll stop and I'll pass on to the next speaker, and we will interact more during the Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I get Ben to give us his comments first? Thank you.
Thank you. That's well. I was also asked to do a quick self-introduce because I've been a bank analyst and not center profile. I started my career as an investment professional, fund manager, and so that's what I'm really going to draw on, that way of looking at companies and thinking about companies as well. Draw some examples. And the hats that I wear now, I wear two hats, both of which are important actually. One is I have my own business based in Singapore, Asia Research and Engagement, and we analyze companies and we work with investors to raise strategic concerns with companies across the Asian region. And also, I'm a specialist consultant, that's the consultant word, specialist consultant with the Asian Corporate Governance Association and write the Malaysian chapters of CG Watch, which is one of our primary reports. And one of the recommendations from ACGA has been a stronger focus on strategic ESG issues, including climate change. But where I talk about companies, it's typically coming from our work with ARE. So I'd like to share essentially two comments. One is this climate governance really the job of directors of companies? And secondly, can we have a look at where some of corporate Malaysia is today using disclosure? I'll give a few examples of where we're at today. And in that, the key point is that it is about a journey. Strategic formulation is a journey, and the integration of climate change into strategic formulation is also a journey. So first off, is climate governance a job for directors? The answer is going to be yes, obviously. But why? So, fundamental duties of directors, including supervision of strategy, includes accountability to investors, includes monitoring the risk management mechanisms throughout a company. If we look at the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosure, TCFD, was mentioned earlier. That's a framework that was initially recommended by the Bank of International Settlements. The global institutional investors are really backing and pushing that framework, TCFD, to all listed companies around the world, particularly to the largest 100. And what does that say? It says that for disclosure, companies should discuss their governance, discuss their strategy, discuss their risk management process and discuss their targets and metrics. So governance strategy, risk management framework, targets and metrics for climate change. And in terms of climate change, they look at two particular risks. One is the physical risks. We've heard a lot about sea level rise. And another is the transition risks. So that could be regulation or it could be new technology. We've heard a lot about new regulation today. We've also seen the Minister describing the UK envoy describing the decline in cost curves for renewables. So that is essentially an expectation now of global institutional investors of companies, including companies in Malaysia, and particularly for the non-executive directors, ensuring that company reporting meets that requirement is increasingly an expectation. Of course, that framework, TCFD, is just the disclosure framework, and behind it there's sort of broader duties of directors, and that's where the Climate Governance Initiative from WEF comes in. So one aspect of the duties is disclosure, but the other aspect is everything else that's around that, which the CG principles from WEF talk about. So where's Malaysia today? And I think that the simplest way of answering that is to look at a couple of examples. So I'll take Tenaga Nasional Berhad, for example, which I think we've heard quite a lot about in different contexts. If you go back about 5 years, the disclosure from the annual report of TNB had several pages of environmental commitments. And it talks about remediation of the ash ponds, coal and tailing ponds, and things like that. But broadly speaking, it didn't mention climate change. So no disclosure of CO2 emissions and no deep consideration of strategy. Fast forward to today, and we see that there's much more detailed discussion of climate impacts. There's targets for renewable power generation, which to some extent align with national targets. So 1.7 gigawatts is TNU's target for 2025. So we can see that the organization is really thinking about how to change its business, how capital expenditure changes, how research and development changes. And we see this around the world. So many of the European utilities, they started on that journey. And when they start, there's a lot of resistance, there's a lot of how are we going to do this? There was 3 months to install a wind turbine. Well, that seems really costly. But until you start, you don't, you've got a group of engineers. Once they're given a problem, they're going to find solutions. After the starting point, you start to grow confidence and define what I call a transition path. So, here we are with business as usual today. There's the future that we need to get to. How are we going to be profitable on that journey from where we are today to that future? So TNB is definitely on that journey, and likely will become more confident in discussing that through its annual report. So I want to share, I'll just share one other example from the finance sector, my sector. So we looked through the disclosures of the 6 largest listed Malaysian banks. And we're not really so focused on the CO2 footprint of the banks themselves. I mean, that's neither here nor there. Really, it's about the lending portfolio, the transactions, and the business and the financing that the banks are facilitating. So all of them talk about responsible lending, the top 6. But do they talk about climate change in the context of responsible lending? 2 of them do. Only 2 out of 6. Still, that's better if we go back sort of 5 years. Again, we weren't talking about responsible lending at all. So we are seeing significant progress there. And the 2 that talk about responsible lending, Maybank and CIMB, talk about climate change in the context. There's clearly been some consideration And there's some disclosure on, I tend to think of responsible lending as what you don't lend money to, and sustainable financing is what you do want to lend money to. And there's a breakdown by Maybank, for example, of the different renewable energy categories that they've been financing. So I always think, if you look at the scale of the problem is pretty daunting. But if we look at the response today, then the response isn't there. But on the other hand, if we look at it as a journey, we can clearly see sharp acceleration. But the acceleration that's required in the duties of non-executive directors is to understand what the strategy for their business is going to be to get it from where it is today to where it needs to be, given all the climate change related risks and opportunities, and to try to find a profitable transition from here to that. So I think I'll stop there and look forward to any other questions, and we have some other rich examples to share.
Thank you. I'm the last one, so I hope I can still capture your attention. It's really wonderful to be here, and thank you to the organizers for inviting WWF to be on this panel. Audience here may be wondering what a conservation-based NGO can bring to the table in this discussion. But I hope by the end of this, I will be able to convince you that nature offers many solutions, much of which remain untapped. At the same time, not paying heed to nature can expose us to a multitude of risks, exacerbated by climate change. So I will start that as my key point and also touch on some of WWF's engagement with the corporate sector, especially the financial sector, on this issue, as well as initiatives to enable corporates to better manage climate risks that WWF has been working on. So on my first point, we in Malaysia as a country are blessed with abundant natural attributes, be it lush forests, vibrant seas, and other ecosystem services, also all teeming with an incredible variety of life. This, in all its glory, is our natural capital. Today, however, we generally take this for granted, and we are at peril of losing this wealth even without realizing its immense value. Nature provides our fundamental needs like the air we breathe, food, water, energy, as well as the raw materials and ecosystem services for economic activities. So you may wonder, what has that got to do with climate change? Well, everything. We've heard speakers before, Dr. Nagu has already alluded quite strongly to this as well. We saw in Sunita's opening address how forests are the lungs at a planetary scale. Trees absorb the carbon we emit into the atmosphere and provide us with oxygen. Along with the oceans, this accounts for 25% of global emissions, according to the newly released report by the Intergovernmental Panel on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, IPBES, which was released just last week or the week before that. 25% of global emissions absorbed by nature, our oceans, our forests. And we as Malaysians should especially pay heed to this, as the founding chair of IPBES is a Malaysian, our former science advisor, Datin Seri. But the value that nature provides doesn't stop there. Forests also regulate the water cycle and the microclimates. And since we're an SC, if the regulator goes, what do you think? Chaos ensues, right? We need the regulators around. One dramatic effect is that our rainfall will go haywire. Too much water at certain times, too little at others. And guess what? We have already actually experienced this. For example, in 2016, Bank Negara Malaysia reported that the agriculture sector had registered a contraction in the first quarter due to adverse weather events. Now, that might have been an abnormality at that time. I believe it was due to unusual drought conditions. But if we carry on in the path that we are in right now, in the future this could become what we call the new norm, threatening not just the agriculture sector, but in fact all economic activities. For what industry or business does not strongly rely on water security? So it's a cross-cutting issue. So what can we do? Well, we can work with nature, and this is what some progressive companies are already doing and reaping multiple benefits from. I'd like to share a couple of examples. In Sabah, WWF Malaysia is working with a company called Sabah Softwood Berhad. They are a paper and pulp and plantation company. And elephant damage of crops was a perpetual problem, causing huge financial losses annually. Workers were also fearful of being attacked. This was as the plantation was actually on a historic elephant migratory route. So as a responsible corporate entity, the company decided to release about 10,000 hectares or so for a wildlife corridor. They found financial losses shrunk from about annually 500,000 to 20,000 due to elephant conflict. Now replanting and restoration works are being undertaken, so this will not only secure habitat for wildlife, but also absorb carbon from the atmosphere. So you have the benefit on climate, you have the benefit for biodiversity, you also have your financial benefits. Another nice example is that from the Indian conglomerate Mahindra, and this we actually heard at a conference on protected areas in Kuching last couple of years ago. They invited Mahindra to present on their initiatives. And I'd like to share that with all of you. Mahindra ran a natural capital valuation for one of its entities and found that the invoice from nature amounted to a whopping 74% of gross turnover. 74%. Not accounted for in the books, but 74%. So this made its board and management take note of nature's contribution to their business. And thereafter, in one example, in designing a new plant, more than 50% of the area was kept under green cover. That plant was located in a rather dusty, arid area. However, it was found that dust control was increased by 59% because of the green cover, which provided natural filtration services. In addition, ambient temperature was also found to have dropped by 2 degrees compared to its surrounding areas, likely reducing cooling costs and avoiding carbon emissions. The green cover would also at the same time absorb carbon. In addition to all of this, the financial benefits, the climate benefits, intangible benefits were also accruing because the workers were healthier and happier. So before I move on to my next 2 points, I would like to emphasize that nature-based solutions, as Dr. Nagu has already talked about, should be a strong feature of corporate Malaysia's response to addressing climate risks. It not only reduces risks, it can also generate bottom-line benefits. My second point is on the engagement we have with corporate sectors. The corporate sector is a very important stakeholder in our mission, which is to protect our wildlife. And WWF Malaysia has a team that works with the financial sector, both with institutional investors and the banking sector. My colleague Shamin is here, so if you'd like to hear more about that later, we can have a chat with her. And regionally, we also have the Asia Sustainable Finance Initiative. In addition to that, we also work with corporates in different areas. We have teams that work on markets targeting commodities like timber and palm oil and fisheries, and promote certification schemes. And recently, we have also started working on food waste with hotel chains and restaurants. Our philosophy is simple: to promote sustainable business practices, to be able to coexist peacefully with nature, or as we call it, living in harmony with nature. The financial sector, of course, is a key driver of change. And as this sector evolves and embraces sustainability, it is important that their corporate clientele is also ready for the journey. They are mutually dependent after all. So it is truly inspiring to be here today at the launch of the CGI Malaysia, whose noble aim is to empower boards in addressing climate risks. And now I come to my third and final point, and thank you for your patience in listening, is how WWF can support this journey. WWF as a global network has developed tools and knowledge products and initiatives in this regard. For example, we have a tool called the Water Risk Filter that helps corporates assess their exposure to water risks. We are also part of an initiative called the Science-Based Targets, which help corporates align their emission reduction targets to the global budget based on science. And locally, in collaboration with the Suruhanjaya Syarikat Malaysia, SSM, WWF Malaysia developed a green business toolkit that provides simple to more complex approaches. We have many other knowledge products and tools of this nature. So to conclude, yes, the risks are great. Yes, it is a complex issue. And yes, we are really in uncharted territory. But as the saying goes, and as many speakers before me have already mentioned, in the midst of chaos, there is opportunity. We must challenge ourselves to secure this opportunity. I'd like to give a final example of General Electric's eco-imagination. They invested back in 2005, 15 billion in cleaner tech R&D. And 10 years on, they have reaped more than 200 billion in revenues. The time they made that decision, they were the pioneers. But it paid off. So, I'd like to swing back now to my key point here. Malaysia's great, but also greatly undervalued strength is our nature, our natural capital. Let us seize this opportunity to work with nature. Let us charter a path towards climate resilience for our businesses by investing in nature. The rewards will be multifold. Thank you very much.
Thank you to our panelists for their comments. And perhaps maybe we might also touch back on some of the terminology that we have here. I think, as Ben has pointed out, we are, from a company perspective, the boards are really in a world of, having to really disclose and report on a lot of these issues. This is in Bursa and in other stock markets that you may be operating in. And of course, I think maybe the nomenclature is environmental, social, and governance is quite, ESG is really quite a popular terminology. And of course, some people say that if you're coming from a corporate social responsibility, just think longer term and you're getting into environmental, social, and governance. And of course, when we start talking about climate governance, then there's issues about what are you doing to prevent, mitigate, or adapt? And then really we're getting into a more technical, I think, viewpoint on that. Really, if we look at the reporting, I think a lot of people reflect that it's been quite a lot of quantitative reporting, like, to a certain extent, 100-page sustainability reports, and then, there's a call for better quality of reporting, which I think maybe then comes down to those key points and key measurement indicators that come in. And even, I think, maybe reflecting on what we're talking about, questions about are there data sets on things? I mean, maybe part of this is reflecting thought about how do we do comparisons, Is this something that companies are going to be uncomfortable with, or something that's going to be helpful? Especially when you're coming down to TCFD and really doing scenario analysis on your 2 degrees or 1.5, how's it gonna, what's that dollar and cents? I guess the question out there is really how ready are companies to adopt such kind of disclosures? And I think when we talk about adoption or not, or going to adopt, I suppose there's organizational issues. Are you constrained by financial human resources? Smaller companies might feel less equipped. In that sense, maybe comparisons or data sets, or even and I know we have some boilerplates, but maybe we want not just boilerplates on words, but actual cases and examples, so that companies can see where they are in terms of quantifying. What about technological questions, climate literacy? Exactly what Lavanya said about having toolkits that can get you to a more rapid understanding. Case studies, like Ben has pointed out, and I think as Dr. Nagu has also pointed out, that we're going through these key areas of energy and transport, and maybe we can talk about then the business environment, right? What about the costs and incentives to do things, and then also the factor of the board. How certain are they of the benefits and costs? So I guess coming down to quite practical things, and I think what was really interesting in the keynotes is that it's clear that the ministry is very practical about which are the focus areas, the key impact areas, and how they're going to incentivize companies to do something. So maybe I can go straight into our sort of questions here before I open up to the floor. But I think it's maybe more questions for Dr. Nagu, but how Malaysia's targets are we doing well on this front, and how companies I suppose performing and into these energy and transport areas. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. In normal layman language it's called targets. In the convention language, which is negotiated by diplomats and legal people, it's called nationally determined contributions. So the reason why they put all these words there is because they want it to be driven by the country to decide what's your target. So Malaysia, we've got a target of 45% of carbon intensity reduction based on 2005 baseline data. Right, that was our target. So how we are doing our biannual update report, which is a report that we do and we make public and is scrutinized, our achievement is now about 33%. So it's 45%, we've achieved 33%. But there's a catch to this. When we pledge to the world that we're going to cut GHG emission of GDP by 45%, we said we will do 35% of reduction ourselves, but we need the remaining 10% for the big guys to help us. This is actually because when the Earth Summit met in 1992 and Tun Mahathir 1.0, when he went for that meeting, he made it very clear, there were certain fundamentals put in place. Certain fundamentals put in place that developing countries need the room to grow. For example, Malaysia, and I have made this remark a couple of times, in the brink of independence, 52% of our population was in poverty. 52%. And in 2014, the figure has gone down to 0.4%. So we need the room to grow. Whereas because the curve of growth is different in developed countries, industrial revolution we heard happened in Britain and they have grown, and we need the room to grow. So we had this very important principle called common but differentiated responsibility. So we said we can do 35%, but we need that remaining 10% to be done with the help of others, because we need not just funds, it's also technology. Very much a time, even working in the ministry where we meet foreign governments and all that, when we look at technology transfer, we are very important is that many of these technology, the cutting-edge technology, are covered by very strong intellectual property protection. So you probably get a technology which is a couple of generations older. So this is very important that we negotiate and we get the most up-to-date technology assistance to help developing countries to get on by. This is very important. So this is where we are. We are at 33%. We are hoping to get some assistance for the 10%. And I think the 2% for Malaysia to achieve will be very difficult with all the menu of things Minister has told you this morning that she plans to
So yeah, so I think as you point out, really the technological capacity to understand what should be done, can be done, the literacy of at the corporate level, I think that's would be essential. I think for the corporates in Malaysia as well, to learn best practices and to see examples of how they might be able to leapfrog into climate governance. And maybe I could just ask Dr. Nagu and also wider in the panel, I mean, do you see in Malaysia any particular, literally hotspots, either geographically or within sectors where there's greater urgency? Because who are going to be our lead, within the corporate economic sectors, either because of negative pressure or maybe because of more positive, this opportunity to grab this risk as an opportunity. So both the negative and the positive aspects.
In terms of the biggest emitters are the energy sector. It's about 80% of all the emission that happens in Malaysia is from the energy sector. It's huge. It's 80% as well. So when you talk about the most important hotspots, I think I made some reference to coastal areas. It's, of course, this whole issue about food security. With climate change, you'll have all these issues. And all these are also reported in our documents that we report to the world. And of course, increased floods and coastal erosion and mangrove areas. But also, there's also studies on certain commodities. With climate increase at 1.5 at 2, what will happen to our key commodities, palm oil, rubber? There will be impact. So all these reports are there and the impacts are there. So these are some of the hotspot areas that are important. And I think I'll leave it at that for now. And maybe if anyone else wants to clarify this.
Yeah, I think just to add on to what Dr. Nagu said, apart from the risks that these areas or these sectors face from 1.5 or 2 degree rise, there is also the transition risk. The transition risk meaning changes in policy, legal action, and these things are already being seen across the world. I read a report that said there's already been more than 800 legal actions based on climate change around the world, even one in the Philippines. So these are also issues that are bringing climate lens to how businesses run more and more, upfront and personal, if you like.
Ben, maybe I'll try to make this, to close this actually, because I want to really open it to the floor. Maybe I could ask Ben a bit more about the corporate best practices. Maybe not just on the reporting front, but the ones who are leading in terms of quantified improvements and things. Because we have a lot of.
Okay, so I'm going to slightly push back on that question, because there's one aspect which is quantified improvements. So have we disclosed our CO2 and are we managing that down? But that's something you can already measure from a business perspective as a lagging indicator. Because you're already doing it and therefore you can measure it and therefore you can improve it. But when you talk about the strategy of the business, or if you're an investor, you care about the future. In a way, you only really care about the past in as much as it's going to tell you about the future. And that's really important for directors and boards. So there it becomes, what is the future looking like, and what capital expenditure do we need to do? Do we need to develop new products entirely? Do we need to do some scientific analysis to work out what the right standard should be? So I'll pick on a couple of points around that from the food sector. So in Malaysia, obviously palm oil. Historically, that's been, let's say, around haze, biodiversity, land use change. That third one, land use change, actually Malaysian industries developed standards on high carbon stocks. There's two competing standards on the carbon impact of what piece of land you should use. So the industries had to go and do some detailed analysis. It's not just about the science, there are two different competing standards, so we've also got to negotiate for the merging of those standards. So all of that work, right, it's not just about the quantification of the issues, it's about setting the right framework and baseline going forward. That's something that industry needs to really do. Let's look at another one, more consumer-facing. We had an example, seen Sunita at the back there now, and I have to say thank you for the invite, although she's about to unthank me. Plant-based dairy was one of the examples that she used, so that's sort of planet-healthy dairy. The other way of doing more planet-healthy dairy is not to use dairy, it's to use, say, soy and have soy milks and things like that, right? So if you're a direct, and in the US, soy milks or non-dairy milks has got to about 13% of total milks in the US. We've just had the first IPO of a plant-based meat company, which was Beyond Burger, went up over 100% on the first day. Fantastic, successful IPO in, well, not a technology, not a sort of social media IPO, something a little bit different. So if you're a board member of a dairy company or a livestock company, is the question, are we about to be disrupted by this? Can we change? Tyson Food, for example, they decided, hang on a minute, we don't want to be in the meat business, we want to be a protein business. They took some shares in Beyond Meats, which is the company that I just mentioned, IPO, and they're also bringing out their own range of plant-based proteins. So that's resetting, that's like going, where's our future going to be? Maybe our future's protein, not meat. Can we detach? You know, so those are the kind of questions I think really, it's not just about the quantification, important as that is. It's also about the strategy and what's the business that we're going to need to be in the future, and what spending, R&D, and industry standards we're going to need to get there.
Okay, thank you. May I open to the floor? Please.
My name is Firas Rad, and I'm the World Bank Country Manager in Malaysia. And I'd like to thank the organizers for the kind invite and to really commend them for a wonderfully inspiring and stimulating launch this morning, and for the panelists and their contributions. And this is really consistent with our corporate commitment to this global agenda, and we share it, I think, very intimately. I'd like to, with your permission, and I also do recognize the incredibly profound role that corporate boards can play in making the talking heads that the minister was talking about. And I loved her imagery this morning about the talking negotiators, you know, continuing to talk while the rising waters were reaching neck level. And so action counts a lot. And I want to just go back to the keynotes and to Sunita's slides this morning, where she put up different images. And one image was the power of students and youth movements to be drivers of change. And she showed how maybe one Swedish teenager played a huge role in unlocking a lot of financial flows for this purpose. My question around this issue revolves around another slide that she showed. And she said in her own language that youth movements and student action in this region are relatively relaxed. And my question maybe to the panel is, why is it so relaxed here in this region relative to other regions, and maybe what can be done about it? Thank you.
Maybe we should take a second question, and then we can answer. Can we get another? Thank you.
Thank you. Again, Lal Chan, next international. Excuse me for taking a bit of time to what I say a reality check. Dr. Nagu, as a civil servant, I think you are trying to make some politically correct statements, but I am a bit politically incorrect. In terms of our claims on reducing poverty, I think we have to be real. Our poverty level is really unrealistic, because if we have 0.04 or 0.4% poverty level, why do we have to have over 4 million households receiving BRAIN or Bantuan Sara Hidup to make ends meet? It is ridiculous where 4 million households is more than half the population of the country. So perhaps it's a wrong situation. The other point where I think we need to get real is this question of carbon intensity reductions. You're right to say we have achieved 33%. I heard of that being achieved in 2015. And to go from 40% in 2020 to 45% in 2030, I think it's a bit ludicrous if you look at the numbers in a rational way. And I believe Malaysia is a developed country. We have the technical expertise to achieve carbon reduction issues. But in terms of intensity reduction, it is even more, because Malaysia is moving away from manufacturing industry, which is heavily energy intensive, to services industries, which uses less energy. So the carbon intensity is automatically going to reduce. For us to claim a target of 45% with 10% coming from technical assistance and financial assistance is, I think, a little bit weak and does not really justify what the situation is. I believe that the participants here are well aware and converted on these issues, but sometimes we tend to be a little bit too politically correct in terms of statements. I believe that's fine when you're talking to the general public, but in a forum of this nature, we are looking at opportunities and things that are more at a higher level. We need to go away from the short statements, face facts, because if we do not recognize what our problems are, we can't find solutions to those problems. Thank you.
Actually, during the last elections, I noticed something. Civil servants, when they are in service, they're very politically correct. When they retire, they become politically totally incorrect. So, when you're in court, you have to play the game. You know what I mean? So, I don't think it was a political statement. I mean, that was the best endeavor Malaysia could do, to say that we can do this 45% carbon intensity. Oh yes, we could achieve more. But we are actually, in June, there's going to be climate negotiations going to happen. You see? And like what Minister says, these climate negotiations take a lot of time. And we're actually telling, and Mr. Lal's comment whether we're a developed country or developing country, that's also a reality check. I, for one, do not believe we are anywhere near a developed country. Environment issues, social issues, probably your GDP, we are now hovering around 10, 12,000, 15,000, you are there in a developed country. But environmental issues, social issues, I doubt if we are there. And I think Mr. Lal, you know quite well, when the government rolls out the budget, and my friend Lavanya will know, the priorities are so many, right? And BRIM, right? I know you were smiling when you talked. BRIM is totally nothing to do with poverty. BRIM is a totally different equation. It's got to do with politics and all that, right? And we don't want to bring them into this discussion, right? But when the government does the budget, it's got so many, it's got education, it's got healthcare, it's got defense. Environment gets one of the most least amount of contribution. So, to have all these ambitious targets is fine. But I think you also have to play the game in the climate diplomacy that Malaysia needs to grow. And we need to put a bit of pressure on the big guys to also help countries like us. So, while it's nice to, while there was an earlier question, right, why is Malaysian youth quite quiet or the region's youth quite quiet? Recently, there was a group of youth who took the streets. I don't know what they call. They're telling the government must do more. I think there needs to be a bit of education in this. Well, if the government takes very strong stance on climate change, on biodiversity, we're going to cripple our wings to grow. I mean, while we can say we got all this technology, but in true sense, do we really have them? In true sense, do we really have them? So we have to be very careful in this discourse about youth movement and all that in Malaysia's context. Because you see, I was in a forum a long time ago, and there was this one, it was a forum of United Nations, and suddenly a Malaysian NGO, I wouldn't want to mention the name, took the floor and was writing Malaysia about our oil palm and all that. Then later I met this person over coffee and I was telling her, where did you study? She said, oh, I went and studied in the UK under the government scholarship. I said, do you know how these scholarships come about? It's because of contribution from these sectors. And you cannot deny that, you see. So, I mean, this education has to happen in a very holistic manner so that youths understand how actually this whole climate diplomacy is. And I'm, for one, very concerned, is that with the Paris Agreement, and next week actually I'm going for a United Nations meeting, there's this whole new thing called the Global Pact on Environment. What the developed countries are trying to do, I know I see some friends from foreign, but I'm being very frank with this, is trying to get them to play their game. They're very concerned about these principles called common but differentiated responsibilities. They want to break that. They said enough is enough. We want China, we want India, we want even Malaysia, because when they see our twin towers, they think we're rich. To play the same game, we have the same, that's very dangerous. So we need to be very pragmatic, very careful. And when we make statements that Malaysia is developed, we need to really see in what parameters are we really developed. And I, for one, on a personal basis, feel we've got a long way to go. And thanks. I think anyone else will.
Maybe I'll just touch on the question you raised about the youth. It could likely be because we, as a country, are really still very blessed. We haven't actually felt the severe impacts of climate change that other countries are already facing. But that's not to say that the youth are not concerned. In fact, I personally am very impressed with how youth in this country have mobilized themselves, but it's maybe a bit low-key. There's a group called the Malaysian Youth Delegation that for years have actually trained, taught people and trained up young, hopefully future negotiators, but future corporate leaders, make them climate literate. And they go to the negotiations to see what's going on. Some of the members are here, I think, today, and they do a remarkable job. And this is maybe under the radar, but this is, I think, what provides systemic ability to deal with these issues. Creating future leaders, and also more recently, I think the minister would be happy to hear this also. We are seeing Malaysian school children's innovations winning top prizes at international competitions. So there are these things that are happening, and a lot of these prizes are for environmental issues. So these things are happening, but maybe culturally we keep it under the radar. We don't. Culturally we are not the type of people who generally take to the streets. Rather, we do it, from within the system, behind the screen, so to speak. That's my take.
Question here, and I'm going to take a question from what I've been WhatsApp as well. Please, would you introduce yourself?
My name is Krishna. My question is Dr. Nagu. Dr. Nagu, I think you pointed out very clearly that where the government has problems is both scientific and engineering input from the research institutions and professional bodies, which is very true. And you need hard engineering to solve problems. Yes, you hit the nail on the head. That. On the other hand, you also said slightly contradictory that if we were to go hard on the environment, our business growth would be stagnant. On the other hand, you also say common and differentiated responsibilities, that we need money and technology. I can't understand what technology do we need to solve our environmental problems. We need free technology to solve our problem. Every technology provider in the world will only develop the technology if it's economically viable, if the return on the investment of the technology is within 4 years, 2 years, depending on the industry. So what is that we need technology for? I'm talking about this because there are many technologies developed locally which can solve problems with very quick returns, which will prosper the industry, which is not in the radar of any government ministry which I can think of. I personally have gone to many ministries in the last 10 years, proposing a technology which is so simple to reduce 25 million tons of carbon dioxide from the palm oil industry. Neither the industry nor any of the government department from MEA right to Masta has a radar on such a technology. So the real problem in UK is a very developed country where we have heard from bridge to bridge that various industries join together and they find out what they need the government to help, and they go and tell the government what needs to be done. But in our country, the industries don't approach the government because they think when they approach, it's a little bit of a problem for them. So I think as a government, we should help bring these people together and coach them and ask them and provide solutions or knowledge how to solve these problems. So in what respect government can do in these aspects, please?
Maybe I can just add, maybe in a related way as well, because I think we're seeing, a first wave of investments in CDM and things which didn't quite work out. And so I have a question here about carbon price revival, whether that's a mechanism. And I think, as pointed out from the floor as well, and even in some of the work I've looked at, we have had a biomass, plants that go in and burn gas, and there's always been some issues about actual carbon reductions on that, and how does our panel see intention versus the outcomes on these. And maybe just one more from the floor as well, the last one. Sorry, we have the gentleman with the blue shirt. We're down to our last from the floor, so we will have to get the...
I just wanted to ask Ben, what more can be done to get financial institutions to shift their lending to climate-friendly investments away from fossil fuels? And what more needs to happen for public listed companies or major companies to integrate climate change considerations into their business planning, not from a corporate responsibility, not from a social responsibility point of view, but from a business practice?
Okay, maybe just last one.
Hi. I think what the independent boards and directors have to do to contribute to the climate change, positive climate change is great. But I think at the end of the day, we must look at the root cause of some of the climate issues that we have in Malaysia, which is really waste management. And I think this is a very key sector that needs to be looked at. It is a time bomb that needs to be addressed. And I think government, with the help, of course, of private industry, must look at how to resolve the current issues that's related to waste management. Landfills in the country have 95% of non-sanitary landfills in the country. We need to address that immediately because that's where the problem is in terms of direct climate change issues today. So we hope the government would look into these things. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we have points about technologies, including homegrown, climate-friendly investments, carbon pricing, and waste management.
Thank you, and I appreciate that input from the floor. I know how frustrating sometimes it can be in meeting government agencies because you get from one door to the other door. But I think there are, while that happens, I'll answer your second question first. You've got a homegrown technology and what you can do. I think ministry like MOSTI, we formerly known as MOSTI, now we are MASTAC. We've got windows for grants. It depends on the technology level. If it's on a certain technology level, the grants are available, it's a competitive, it's transparent process. and you could come in and get grants to help you then go for pre-commercialization. So it really depends on the technology level. So I do not know in your context, your carbon reduction technology, where is it in the chain of the whole R&D? Is it in TRL1 or is it only in TRL6? So that's something that we know. And there is windows for funds to facilitate this kind of technology from Malaysia. So on the other earlier comment that you made, what technology is Malaysia looking for to help protect our environment? It's not really to protect our environment. What I'm trying to say here is like, there are a lot of new generation technology available for energy production, for example, that we probably need help. Probably even in the transport sector. So these are technologies actually for, even like what Khalid just mentioned, waste management, waste to energy, for example. I mean, in Malaysia, you know, we've got incinerators, but they don't function, right? Because a lot of negative public perception, and probably these things don't work as efficiently as they are. But just 2 days back, the Japanese ambassador came to tell us that in Japan, incinerators are just beside every condominiums and all that. So he said, that's great, let's have that technology here in Malaysia. So there are technologies that we need. It's not that we do not need technologies. We do need, and they're not available here. So that's to your earlier point. So I hope that answered your question. Khalid had a question that's related. Yes, we do agree. Waste sector is probably the second largest sector that contributes to greenhouse gas emission. And as I said, in the new Malaysia, this issue is still quite fragmented. We've got one ministry looking at solid waste. Our ministry looks at hazardous waste. And minister is talking quite a bit about plastics. So it's quite fragmented. And I think what's really needed is us to sit together, and I think that has to happen at some point, to have a kind of common goal. What we have probably used climate as the point, to try to then address waste issues in a more integrated manner. So if you look at the document Minister was making reference to the single-use plastic roadmap 2018 to 2030, we are not pretending that by 2030 Malaysia will be free of single-use plastic. We doubt it will really happen, because even in ladies' cosmetic, your microbeads and all that are plastic, is it? Unless you convert and be like my grandma, she uses turmeric and all that, is it? So what we're trying to say is, in that roadmap, we actually spell out that it's about time that Malaysia looks at integrated waste management to address the issue of waste in a more holistic way. We're also very conscious in the roadmap. Actually, in the roadmap in 2022, we're trying to tell people to use biodegradable materials. Why 2022? Why not tomorrow? Because we're still not convinced the science and the utility value of a biodegradable material. And biodegradable materials cannot be treated by just putting it in a landfill. It's not like a banana peel, you just disappear. It needs a different kind of waste treatment facility. So, and I like the point that Khalid said, and I think this is something that we have to move towards too. And I just like to share a story. The issue of plastic pollution is real, and it's really big in Malaysia. And Minister herself has gone to ports. And the other day we opened 10 containers. Every other container came from a developed country. So they're coming under false declaration. They're coming in because Malaysia consciously we do import clean, homogeneous plastics because it's got big value. We've got a $30 billion plastic industry, $3 billion recycling industry. It's big business. But we're getting containers with these polymers coming in mixed with rubbish. So frankly, for the custom boys, what they do is that containers pass through scanners. You can't really know whether it's rubbish or is it clean plastic. But this thing is happening. But we're quite happy that in the just recently concluded Basel Convention, the global community has taken some steps to address, and we hope that plastic and rubbish movement will be stopped at host countries. In fact, as I was driving here to my colleagues are in the port, and we are now arranging containers to be sent back to these countries of origin. So this issue of plastic waste, plastic, and all these are real big issues. And I agree with Khalid that we need an integrated waste management approach beyond ministries. So I'll just stop there.
Okay, can I give a couple of bullets and then a story on your answer? On technology, if I can speak in bullets at a time, patents is one issue which needs technology transfer, but there's a lot of know-how as well. Here's a fun example of a know-how question. Everybody, I think, knows now that meat-heavy diets are bad for the environment somewhere. You might be in Malaysia, you might have imported meat, so the carbon budget happens somewhere else. So how are we going to have less meat-heavy diets? Well, we need chefs to innovate and make fun food for people that people want to eat that doesn't have meat in it. Most of the time you go to a restaurant, you ask to see the vegetarian options, they'll give you spaghetti pomodoro or something like that. It's really boring, nobody wants it. Green salad. So that is a great example of know-how rather than technology, and innovation that doesn't require patents. Okay, on to how do we encourage more? So that, first of all, I think that this kind of initiative is exactly the right way. Non-executive directors need to be asking the right questions. They need to have enough knowledge and confidence in the issues to be able to ask the right questions. And then on occasion they'll need some actual analysis to support that discussion. And executive management teams, that question around confidence, you can't take action unless you've got high conviction. So at some point there's some research or analysis that needs to be done to increase conviction. One anecdote which is relevant and perhaps might want to be disseminated in the Malaysian financial sector is if you look over the last 3 weeks, the Singaporean banks have just announced, each of them, that they will no longer finance new coal-fired power. So, in fact, I attended the AGM of one of the banks and to ask that question supported by a group of institutional investors. In fact, the bank was very happy that we asked the question because they had stopped financing new coal-fired power, but they hadn't actually announced it. So they were happy with the opportunity to explain that. Now, Singapore, of course, can do that. It doesn't have that much. It's got very limited coal-fired power in its grid, but I think that that's quite an interesting and important signal. And so other banks in the region might just think about what are the implications of that, how the ASEAN neighbour is taking that view and taking that decision. But it requires asking the right questions and getting strategic analysis and research to increase the conviction level to make strategic decisions. And some tools, which you might get to hear about.
Yeah. Well, for both points on technology and waste are very important. On technology, of course, I think it's really key that we have access to new technology, the latest, because it's still about, technology is still, something which, of course, it generates income, but we have to look at it from a, bigger perspective. If we get stuck with old technology, it's going to have a lock-in effect. So we are building a coal power plant, say today with the carbon capture and storage. It's going to be with us for the next 30 years. And moving out of that cycle is going to be very difficult. So access to technology is actually very key, the latest technology. And some of these technologies are already available elsewhere. And this is where the whole issue of transfer of technology at an affordable cost to countries that are on the development path is very critical. We really want to look and address the issue of climate change from a global perspective. On the issue of waste, I just want to throw some buzzwords. Circular economy, more with less, waste to wealth. These are all things that we can actually use as guiding principles to stop generating so much waste, to be more resource efficient, and really address many of these issues at the same time generating better, income. So that, I think what we need to do is change our mindsets. This is a big problem, yes, and one issue that maybe we haven't really touched on is the whole uncertainty that surrounds the issue of climate change. We don't have a crystal ball that tells us actually what's going to happen in the future. And all of us, whether it's businesses or any other personal planning, we generally tend to rely on historical data, what's happened in the past. But climate change changes all of that. It takes a temporal perspective. You have to have an eye in the future. So it gets complex. But I'd just like to end off with a little story that when I talked to my dad about this, he said, yes, but actually, you remember when it was the year 2000? Just before the year 2000, everybody was worried about the Y2K issue. So much uncertainty around it. And, but we went through it. Probably because we took stock of what the potential risk could be and made concerted efforts to be prepared for it. And when the time came, yes, it went by smoothly, but not because it was not going to happen, but because we were prepared. So in that way, I think that's how we need to look at climate change as well. It's a risk, yes, but we have to take stock of it now and start taking the actions today so that we can also sail through this. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much to our panelists, Lavanya, Dr. Nagu, and Ben. I think we've got a really good set of questions from the floor. Thanks for staying with us. Time moved a bit, but we've pretty much kept to the 60 minutes. I think maybe one thing that is maybe not quite answered is the question of carbon tax or carbon pricing, but maybe for another time. Thank you again. Thank you.
That's right.